With the changes to skill gem quality, there's been a lot of talk about using Enhance, and personally I've even talked about some unique items to enhance the quality of your experience. But I don't think this is a one-size-fits-all solution, and in fact, there are times where scaling the quality could be detrimental because everything in Path of Exile has a cost. Scaling your build is a zero-sum game, so for every point of DPS you gain, you lose a point of defense. Or at least that's a theory. In reality, it's even more complicated. And before I continue, I just want to add a quick disclaimer. The amount of changes here and the information revealed so far has been genuinely overwhelming, plus a lot subject to change. I've done my best here to sort through the patch notes, look at the skill gem quality changes, like I did with my biggest winners and losers, to give you an idea of when quality scaling is worth it versus not. But not every skill where this is worth it is covered in the video. I'm pretty sure for every example I do include, there's 5 more that I don't. So if there's any examples that stand out to you, feel free to comment about them down below. And who knows, maybe you'll see them featured in a future video when I get to theory crafting specific builds. Get subscribed for that, by the way, because I'm definitely going to do some either before or after League start, and leave a like while you're down there. Also, as another very small disclaimer, I'm not the best at math. I tried to give this a good shot and get everything right, did a lot of Googling, even asked someone, but if there's something off, I apologize. But for now, let's start by asking, is Enhance a bait, and when should you scale quality on your skill gems? Let's just say if your skill gems give +1 of something. What do I mean by something? Well, Arc gives +1 chain, Cobra Lash gives +1 chain, and Winter Orb gives +1 stage. In this case, you're increasing the total output of the skill. Let's use Arc as an example. It's a popular skill, it just got buffed, and it's also really cool. Who doesn't want to zap people with lightning? A level 20 Arc has 7 chains baseline, and 15% more damage per remaining chain, i.e. 105% more damage on the first hit, or 205% of the base damage on the first hit. Quality adds 1 chain per 20%, 15% more damage added to the above number. Diala's Malefaction adds 30% quality. Enhanced Support adds 24% quality at level 4, or if you put it in a red socket in your Dialas, 40% quality. For all the testing, I'm going to use Diala's Malefaction as an example, and assume that an Enhance is level 4 and socketed in the Dialas. Yes, some people will be using Ashes of the Stars instead. It has the same baseline effect as Diala's. And some people will have an Awakened Enhance, but I didn't feel quite comfortable assuming that you had an Awakened Enhance, or you were doing something like a double corrupted Diala's, or you're getting to level 8 or doing anything truly ridiculous like that. There may be outliers here, but I'm going to talk about something that I can spread across a whole bunch of examples, because this is complicated enough as it is. So, going back to Arc, at 0% quality, it deals 205% of base damage. At 20% quality, it deals 220% of base damage. So this is a buff of about 7.3% more damage than before. Or actually, no buff, because it's just making up for the Hellman chain. Now with Diala's, Arc deals 235%, which is about 6.8% more damage. Remember though, Diala's gives 30% quality, and it's 1 chain per 20. You get 1.5 chains, but you can't have 0.5 of a chain, so it's automatically rounded down. And the rounding really hurts it here, but it's not looking great to begin with. Let's try that level 6 Enhance. 265% of base damage. Yep, 12.8% more damage for a support. Now tell me, when's the last time you looked at a support gem and said 12.8% more damage looks good? Because Arc has so many chains by default, attempting to scale the quality gives terrible results. This is further hurt by needing the even 20% quality breakpoints before seeing any increase. Arc got a buff, which makes up for the removal of a Hellman chant, and that's about it. Now, in some of these cases, that isn't true. Rolling Magma, for example, did probably come out ahead, as did Cobra Lash, and Winter Orb probably ended up behind. It'll vary based on the skills, and again, you're going to have to look into it for the skill that you want to play yourself. But what about if you have far fewer things being granted the quality, like with the Bladestorm gem? And some other cases include Ray's Zombie, General's Cry, and Volcanic Fissure. There's a baseline of 3 storms for the Bladestorm skill. Quality adds 1 storm per 20%, so we still have the same rounding problem, and by default, Bladestorm does 150% of weapon damage at level 20, with each storm adding a further 75%. So let's see, how does this work now? At 0% quality, Bladestorm does about 375% weapon damage. This is with you attacking and 3 storms ticking. At 20% quality, it goes up to 450. This is about 20% more damage from quality, which again, restores the functionality to what it was with the helmet enchant. But what if you start scaling it? Well, now you go to 525% weapon damage with Bladestorm, which is about 16.7% more than a 2020. The rounding's really hurting, but it's at least better than Arc. With a level 6 Enhance, you go to 675% weapon damage, which costs you a support gem in exchange for around 28.5% more damage. Like with Arc, further raising the quality isn't all that good versus a support gem, though doing it in this case isn't just about dealing direct damage with the storms. If we're counting sandstorms, then having more of them does equal more clear and therefore higher quality of life. And if you're ever finding yourself in a place where you're playing a version of Bladestorm that doesn't have a single support gem that gives more than 28% more damage, it could actually be worth it to wear a Dialis and put Bladestorm in. Kind of, sort of, because you'd also need... So ultimately, again, quality scaling isn't the best here. It just doesn't scale hard enough. And support gems are often 30 or 40% more damage. Though I do think Volcanic Fissure could be a standout example of where it could work, depending on everything else that you're doing. Then being able to wear Ashes of the Stars, scaling both the level and the quality at once, could work a little bit better than the example given here with Dialis. Now a minute ago, I mentioned increasing the quality of life or clear speed. What about skill gems that do that? Let's say Scourge Arrow, Tornado Shot, Forbidden Rider, Spark. This flips things around a bit. You're not gaining direct damage for quality anymore. And no matter how many additional secondary projectiles you have from Spore Pods, Tornado Shot, or Spark, only one lands per cast or per pod or per TS primary projectile due to shotgunning rules. However, each projectile you add increases the likelihood of enemies getting hit, which does result in a measurable real-world increase to clear speed. Since it scales based on enemy density, player skill, and gear, it's impossible to give an overview and provide quality breakpoints where this matters. But as a rule of thumb, I'd say these skills feel really good when they get 20% quality, but you shouldn't scale quality past 20% unless it's incidental. For most of these skills, you're going to get more damage than before from a 2020 gem, but the damage itself is more or less just making up for the loss of a helmet enchant, which means in a lot of these cases, skills aren't big winners or losers. The potential exception here being something where it used to get damage and now it gets quality of life, or vice versa. It might feel worse to play but hit harder, or feel better to play and not do nearly as much. However, there are also skill gems whose quality enhances their multipliers. And that works a little bit differently, because even though it's a multiplier, I'm going to be treating it as an additive bonus with itself. This self-additive nature is because more multipliers are multiplicative with other damage multipliers. But with themselves, since it's from the same source, they do tend to add together, and that final number is multiplied by either your base damage, your other increases, your more multis, all that stuff. For example, the behavior of the Bane skill when you socket 2 curses. It isn't 1 times 1.42 times 1.42, it's 1 times 1.84. So I'm going to be treating these all as the same. However, until we get our hands on the gems, we can't know for sure, and some of these, as a result, may end up being far more powerful than intended, which could lead to GGG keeping them OP or fixing them mid-league. So keep an eye out for that if you're using any of these and it happens to be self-multiplicative. First up, Crackling Lance. A skill that's been getting a lot of attention, but Reap, Elemental Hit, Blade Flurry, and Blade Vortex generally do work the same way. Now, right now, Crackling Lance gains 35% more damage with hits and ailments per intensity. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to assume 4 intensity at all times, a baseline of 3 from the support, plus your mastery, granting 1. Quality adds 0.5% more damage per quality per intensity. So for a base formula, we get 1 plus 0.35 times 4. At 0% quality, Crackling Lance deals 240% of base damage at 4 intensity. At 20% quality, the new Crackling Lance deals 280% of base damage at 4 intensity, which is about 17% more damage than before. Pretty sizable buff overall. With Dialas, this goes up to 340% of base damage at 4 intensity, making Dialas about a 21.4% more damage multiplier. which is about equal to +2 levels on your skill gem. Interestingly enough, Dialas also gives the option for +2 levels on your skill gem. So whether you put it in a red or green socket, it's more or less the same, and you'll have to use POB to know exactly which bonus is higher, because it could go either way with the rest of your gear. But okay, what happens if you put in that level 6 enhance? Remember, it's a level 4 in a red socket, getting +2 levels going up to 6. Now Crackling Lance deals 420% of base damage. It is blazingly high DPS at 4 intensity, but it costs you a support gem in exchange for 23.5% more damage. Wait a minute, most of the supports used by Crackling Lance give about 40% more damage, especially if you're in a Dialis where they can get for red sockets. And even for comparison, Inspiration support gives 25% more elemental damage with 5 inspiration charges. So yeah, actually Enhance is pretty darn garbage for Crackling Lance, because the more you get of a bonus, the less impactful each additional increase is. The same is true for a lot of the other gems on this list as well. But what about skills where the bonus doesn't really scale, like Earthquake, Consecrated Path, Ice Spear, Glacial Cascade, or Shock Nova? These have fixed values that can be scaled by quality, and in the case of Ice Spear, I guess you can just get crit multi on your gear, so that's maybe a bit of a special exception. Well, for Earthquake, the Aftershock deals 150% more damage with hits and ailments. Quality adds 1.5% more damage to the Aftershock. So you have 1 plus 1.5. Just a straight up 150% more multi for 250% of a base damage with the Aftershock. At 20% quality, this goes from 250 to 280. About 12% more damage than before. Notably, Earthquake did not have any way to scale this damage bonus via an alt quality gem or helmet enchant, so that is just a straight buff to the Earthquake skill, provided you're able to solve duration stuff, or maybe you're an Ignite/Bleedquake and just don't care about duration. If we put Earthquake in a Dialis, we're now up to 325% of base damage with the Aftershock for another 16% more damage. Since you're not exactly going to be scaling gem levels to scale Earthquake damage, this is an interesting way to unlock even more scaling from your chest piece. And with a level 6 enhance, we're going up to 385%, another 18.5% more damage. You'll notice it is still more damage, but that's really, really bad. Many of the melee supports give 40 to 50% more damage, especially when you don't care about attack speed or you're scaling ailments, which unlocks even more options, and you can sometimes get 50 to 60% more damage per support. In this case, I would say Dialis or even Ashes of the Stars could have some uses. There is a point to scale quality to an extent, but Enhance is definitely a bait. And so let's look at a case where Enhance could actually work well. I'm going to call these hyperscalers because they gain a very significant bonus from adding quality. This would be something like Voltaxic Burst, Frenzy, Siege Ballista, or Bone Shatter. Voltaxic Burst's quality gives 1% more damage with hits and ailments for each cast of a spell currently waiting. Therefore, we can think of quality as adding 0.5% more damage per waiting cast. And let's just pretend you're doing 10 triggers a second with a cast on crit version of the build. So 25 waiting casts of a base duration of 2.5 seconds. And as a note, Bone Shatter can probably get even more trauma stacks provided you're able to survive them, as can Voltaxic Burst with duration scaling. But let's just go with it because it gives a decent picture. So at 0% quality, it deals 25% more damage, because it already gives 1% more damage with hits and ailments per cast of a spell currently waiting. Therefore, at 20% quality, that innate bonus is doubled, causing Voltaxic Burst to deal 50% more damage, which is about 25% more total skill damage than before. Now let's say you put on Dialis. Well, here something interesting happens. The scaling goes to 3.5% per waiting cast, and therefore, Voltaxic Burst deals 87.5% more damage from all those waiting casts, or 25% more damage from Dialis, which probably slightly outscales the value of a +2 gem chest, and gives the option to boost your Enhance from level 4 to level 6. So is a level 6 Enhance a good support for Voltaxic Burst? Well, it gives 137.5% more damage, which is one of the biggest numbers we've seen so far relative to the previous value. And as you'd guess, yes, it costs you a support gem and gives about 57% more damage, making this an absolutely massive change. So we finally found something that scales hard enough to give a significant damage bonus and allow you to fully scale your DPS On many hyperscalers, I do think Enhance is a valid choice in a Dialis. However, this means you're giving up one support gem, so it absolutely has to have enough investment, and you're also giving up your chest piece, so your build's probably going to be squishier. If we're looking at raw numbers, I think Bone Shatter would benefit the most from this, but the question is, how the hell do you keep yourself alive if you're doing that? I have no idea. But I guess you can always go with a half-measure route of Ashes of the Stars. Then again, maybe you don't go the hyper attack speed scaling route with Ashes on Bone Shatter anymore. Because you can also increase the amount of bonuses depending on how many waiting casts, trauma stacks, or siege ballistas you have out, which then changes the entire calculus. In some cases, Enhance will be used on these skills, and in other cases it won't, and unfortunately you're really just going to have to explore that yourself. Hopefully though, PoB will be able to calculate all of this easy peasy for you, so unlike me who's just spent the last 3 hours doing math to make this video, you'll have a pretty good time just doing it yourself by putting a couple numbers into PoB, and it takes 30 seconds. But in addition to enhancing existing modifiers, there are also skill gems which add completely new ones, like Cremation. The quality now causes skills to fire projectiles 10% faster. This was something that you couldn't really scale before. Now the fire rate formula is very similar to the cooldown reduction formula. The fire rate is the base rate divided by 100% plus the percent faster. And quality adds 0.5% faster per 1% quality. So by default, your Cremation has a 1 second firing interval, which means every 1 second it's going to fire off all its projectiles. At 20% quality, this goes to a 0.9 second firing interval, about 11% more DPS, and it makes the skill feel more immediate, therefore better. With Dialis, Cremation has a 0.8 second firing interval, going up to about 12.5% more DPS. And if you're scaling the Corpse Explosion part, plus gem levels might not be as important, so this could be a bigger multiplier than just putting it in the red socket. With Enhance, it goes down to a very nice 0.69 second fire interval in exchange for about 16% more DPS. Yeah, okay, that one's pretty darn terrible. And for a lot of these skills, getting that will make it feel better. Quality makes the skill feel better even if it's not a DPS gain, but you probably won't want to scale quality on most of them, with the exception coming to mind being Crest of Desire. This scales hit-based builds like Herald of Thunder very well, and could maybe even scale some of the others like Static Strike or Stormburst, depending on what you're trying to do. It gives guaranteed double damage, up to 50% quality, and up to 8 skill levels. On the other hand, something like Cremation or Toxic Rain gets a really nice separate multiplier that's a baseline boost, and that's about it. As a note, the duration scaling on both Stormburst and Toxic Rain isn't quite the same thing, but it also works in a similar manner where as you get more of it, there are diminishing returns, which is why I included it in the slide. On the other hand, some of the new gem qualities just give more damage. These are a little bit rarer, but hey, at least the scaling is easy to calculate. On Penance Brand, quality gives 0.5% more damage per 1% quality. So it's completely linear. No bonus, 0% quality. 20% quality, 10% more DPS. Dialis, Penance Brand does 25% more, making it about a 13.6% DPS gain. And as you could guess, with a level 6 enhance, yeah, that's not going to scale your Penance Brand well at all. Given massive base damage, Penance Brand in particular is probably going to scale really well off of gem levels. Then you have Burning Arrow getting more burning damage. Again, this one scales up, but it's probably not going to make or break anything, it's just a nice to have separate multiplier. The last skill that I wanted to call out here, because I find it interesting, is Shield Crush. Shield Crush scales both off of gem level and quality scaling now, which means it could be a very good candidate for Ashes of the Stars. And I guess Penance Brand might as well if it happens to scale hard enough off of gem level. So in this case, I wouldn't say Dialis, Ashes maybe, and Enhance probably not for most of these. But then again, who knows? There could be some absolutely crazy interactions if you manage to hit just the right breakpoint balance of both skill gems and skill quality, such as using Shield Crush, putting it in a Dialis, then linking it up to both an Awakened Enhance and Awakened Empower support. Though that's also one of the most insanely expensive things that I've talked about in quite a while. The last example of additional multipliers that I saw were things like Discharge. These are additional multipliers where the scaling is fairly flat, but they have a cap. i.e., Discharge now has a 10% chance to deal damage without removing charges. So from 0 to 99%, It's a more damage multiplier, assuming that you don't need to generate as many charges. But if you get to 100, you only need to generate charges fast enough that they never fall off, and not as fast as you're casting the discharge skill. With Double Strike, it has a chance to deal double damage. So, if you get 100% quality, Double Strike now just deals double damage to bleeding enemies. Again, it caps out and provides no further benefit. You see similar things with Exsanguinate and Creeping Frost. Exsanguinate's quality increases its base duration, making it easier to stack the debuff 3 times, but eventually you're going to have the debuff up 100% of the time anyway, at which point the quality provides no further benefit. And the same for Creeping Frost, where AoE helps overlaps, but once you're already overlapping, it's pretty minor, especially if you're already hitting every enemy anyway. But these aren't even the end of how quality affects different builds. Oh no, there's even more, because some skills have innate penalties built in, like Molten Strike. By default, the projectiles deal 50% less damage, and the quality now provides 10% more damage to those projectiles, which should combine additive with the less projectile damage penalty. This is the one where I'm a little bit uncertain because I'm basing this off of how Divergent Cyclone functions. But if it does function this way, there are some really powerful skills in this category. By default, it's minus 50%. Quality adds 5% more damage per 1%. So you deal 50% less Molten Strike projectile damage at 0% quality. Now at 20% quality, you deal 40% less, which is about 20% more projectile DPS. But something really interesting happens when you add Dialas. Now it goes from 40% to 25% less damage, making Dialas about 25% more projectile DPS, and also getting closer and closer to eliminating that penalty entirely. Throw on an Enhance and, well, it goes to 5% less, so you've pretty much eliminated the penalty. And on a skill like Cyclone, you can actually flip the minus 30% to a positive 15% by this point. But remember, the opportunity cost here is getting pretty high, like Support Gem high. So the more quality you get, the more effective the quality becomes, but it's probably not worth using Enhance. This is especially potent for use cases like Energy Blade. You don't need to support Energy Blade with anything else. So just 20% quality and a generic level 4 Enhance is going to be adding quite a lot of power, especially if you're using Ashes of the Stars in your build anyway, adding another 30% quality and hey, tossing +1 level on top for fun. And then last up, even more support gems where the effect really can't be easily quantified. This is stuff like Detonate Dead, for the chance to detonate an additional corpse, Ice Trap, a chance to rearm, or Summon Raging Spirit, a chance to summon extra spirits. You can treat it as a separate more multiplier, just like we discussed in the Penance Brand example, but the skill acting again has more implications. On SRS, for example, does this mean you could drop Unleash for something like faster casting? If your Ice Trap's rearming and triggers again, does the enemy actually stay within the radius, or is the enemy still alive? And what about Detonate Dead? Does going through your corpses faster let you fish for bigger ignites or keep elemental overload up? Are you hit-based and just dealing more damage anyway? Or does it run through your corpse supply faster, meaning you have to desecrate more and resulting in a DPS loss? These are all questions that have to be answered on a skill-by-skill basis, and in some cases, the quality won't be scaled at all. You'll want to use a 21-0 version of a skill over a 21-20 and avoid the quality, similar to how we didn't want to scale the quality on default Explosive Arrow, which, by the way, you definitely want to use Ashes of the Stars on Explosive Arrow now. It gains additional fuses from quality, which does mean more damage per fuse charge, and it gains additional damage from gem levels. It's a match made in heaven. But in conclusion, because I know this video has been quite long and given a lot of examples, is Enhanced Support a bait? A lot of the time, yeah, it is. And a lot of the time, Diala's a bait too, and Ashes if you're just scaling the quality's a bait, and all of these things are baits. Because as it turns out, you don't want to just blindly increase the quality number to make big number get bigger. But there's a lot more use cases for all of these items than there were before, and that's really cool. Enhance was something that you almost always put just on supporting skills, and now there are several main skills where Enhance is going to be a really good damage bonus, the so-called hyperscalers from my example. They're not going to be super frequent, and who knows, it might even be build dependent, but I think it's cool that quality is far more interesting than it was before. And if you want to know more about some of the quality scaling unique items, well, I have a video on that I released. If you want to know more about the skill's baseline quality and what I think of that, I also talked about that in a recent video. link to both of those up in the card and down below. But I also know that A, there's been a ton of information, so there's a chance that I missed something. B, I'm not a math expert, and I apologize. I did my best. I consulted with a couple people. Hopefully I got all the math parts right, but that's not really my specialty. And of course, all of this is subject to change. While a lot of it might feel set in stone just because it's in the patch notes, this wouldn't be the first time that the patch notes have been slightly different from the final version of the game. If anything though, I think it's going to be even cooler, because I haven't even talked about the quality effect on transfigured gems. And yes, we do seem to be seeing powerful quality effects like double damage on the current transfigured gems, which have been teased. And if you want to know my thoughts on those, well, get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, and stay tuned for future videos. That's it, thanks for watching, congratulations on making it to the end, because I know this really was a doozy. And a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For $5 a month, you can get your name in the credit, just like these fine folks here. This support goes a long way to helping me make videos just like this one. Thanks again for watching, hope you learned something, and I'll see you again sometime soon.